Thank you
here
for
to
coming to
here.
today's forum.
Or some big small projects. But
What is this?
Today's forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Lincoln County. The League of Women Voters is a trusted, nonpartisan political organization. Members of the League do hands-on work to safeguard democracy. While we never endorse a candidate, we are directly involved in shaping important issues to keep our community strong. The League welcomes new members, both men and women. We thank the legislators for their time. Today, we know that Saturdays, especially during the session, are amazingly busy days, and we appreciate the time that you give us here. We thank Deb Roberts for helping with arrangements, and we give thanks to Mercy Medical Center for making this facility available. Please note the cameras around the room. The forum is being taped on behalf of MediaCom and IMON. It will be rebroadcast on IMON Channel 6 and MediaCom Channel 18. It's also being recorded by Neighborhood Network News, and that will be available on neighborhoodnetworknews.com. It will also be given to KCRG for rebroadcast on 9.2. Other news media may also be in attendance. On the back table, you will find legislators committee membership lists, information brochures that may have been provided by the legislators. And I want to highlight this directory of elected officials. It is brand new, up to date for this year, and it gives you contact information for all the public officials who serve in this area. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest moderator for the day. She is a business owner. She is a frequent citizen advocate for legislative issues. She's a farmer. And she is a mom, and if I remember this correctly, a grandmother of 15 grandchildren under the age of 6. Wow. My goodness. I am so pleased to welcome today Cindy Golden, our moderator for the day. Let's give her a hand. Well, as Myrna said earlier, the committee assignment sheets are at the back table. We'll skip opening statements today so that we can get to more questions. And each legislator will have a minute and a half to answer the questions. And each legislator will have an opportunity to answer each question. There's a timekeeper in the front row if you want to show them where you guys are so they know. When there's a half minute left on your speaking time, the timekeeper will hold up the 30-second sign. You'll have time to finish your answer, but she'll hold up the 15-second sign then. Please wrap up when you see the stop sign. If you continue after the stop sign, I may have to say thank you and we'll move on. I've been known to do that a time or two. The legislators, you need to confine your statements and responses to the relevant issues and the Franklin National Tax. And I know you guys have all been really good about that. We request that you in the audience treat the legislators with respect and fairly. Please do, as I'm doing right now, and I have an old archaic one, but turn your cell phones to silent. And if at any time during the forum that you can't hear someone, please let us know. Raise your hand. If you have another question that needs to be asked, if you want to get it up to the question voters, they're up here. Someone will come by and pick up your questions. You're encouraged to submit questions to the legislators. These are the relevant pieces of paper that you need to write them on. Questions must be addressed to all legislators. Raise your hand if you'd like another piece of paper. A lead panel person will come by and pick it up. The lead panel is collecting the questions, and they're sorting them by topic. I'll read as many questions as time allows. Sometimes the questions are combined, so it may not be your specific wording, but we combine them so that we can get more topics in. And many questions, just repeat something that someone else has asked. Please remember not to cheer or clap because we are being recorded and it also takes up time. And we may not get to all of the questions. Some of the legislators will be able to stay afterwards and take questions and you can speak to them individually. So if you pick up the directory on the back, if there's a legislator that you want to speak with about a particular issue, you can call them directly. And another thing that we used to have maps in the back. If you're not exactly sure which district you're in, you can go on to the Lynn County Auditor's website, type in your address. There's the election services part, type in your address and it will tell you exactly where you vote, who your legislator is, who your city council person is, and all of the pertinent information for your particular precinct. So now, do you have questions? Oh, you're there. So we'll start, you can introduce yourself, but all the personal, all the rest of it. Let's go down the line with Representative Bennett. And tell which district you represent.
Thanks everybody for coming. My name is Representative Liz Bennett. I represent Iowa House District 65, which is the southeast side of Cedar Rapids, a little bit of the northeast side, and a little bit of the southwest side.
Good morning, Craig Paulson, State Representative, also Speaker of the House. I represent House District 67, which is almost all of Hiawatha, all of Robbins, Bowman Woods area of Cedar Rapids, and kind of the northwest corner of Marion.
Good morning, I'm Representative Ken Reiser, and I represent House District 68, which is Marion, Bertram, Ely, and the surrounding parts of Lynn County.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Kirsten Markwart. I'm a state representative from the southwest side of Cedar Rapids. I represent the downtown area where all the tall buildings are located, and also Fairfax and Lynn County, Wofford.
Representative Art Stade from Northeast Cedar Rapids, and I wanted to be sure and thank all of you today for being here and participating in the legislative process, for sharing your concerns and asking us questions. So thank you for being here.
Good morning, Todd Taylor, State Representative, House District 70, which is most of Northwest, part of Southwest, Cedar Rapids, and Clinton Township. Thank you for being here.
I'm Rob Hogue. I'm a state senator, District 33, which is most of the east side of Cedar Rapids and some of the southwest side.
Wally Horn. I represent the west side of Cedar Rapids, also the southwest side of Lynn County. I'm on 7 committees, chair 2 or 3 of them.
Liz Mathis, Senator Liz Mathis from District 34, which includes Representative Paulson's and Representative Reiser's district.
Thank you. At the last forum, we spent the entire time on education. So I'm going to start with something different today. This is in regards to mental health. Is there a plan to develop resources necessary in Iowa's communities to serve the residents being displaced by the closing of mental health facilities at Mount Pleasant and Clarinda? And you can just raise your hand when you want. Just go ahead and answer it. Who wants to start? Liz? Senator Mathis?
Thank you, Cindy. Yes, there are a couple of different plans to work with that, but primarily the town of Clarinda and the community around it are not ready to take on some of those community-based services yet. And the MHI in Mount Pleasant is also facing some of the same difficulties, that there are not those kinds of services across the state to help with that. There are some bills, however. There's a bed tracking bill that we have. There is an interstate sharing bed bill that we're looking at. There are some ways that we're trying to attract more psychiatrists. And there is a bill about an interstate physicians compact. And then there is a telemedicine bill. So there are, I'll just call it a suite of bills that individually they're going to help with certain things, but collectively, if all of them pass, some of them will ease on some of the mental health services that would be curtailed in the southern part of the state because of the closures, the impending closures of the MHIs, of which I am against.
Thank you. I forgot to mention, please answer the questions, but please add something new. Let's not reiterate the same thing that was just said. So Senator Horn, you were next. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Hogue.
Thank you, Cindy. First of all, the question suggests that the decision to close Clarinda and Mount Pleasant has been made. And that is not only false, it would be illegal for the Branstad administration to close those facilities without legislative approval. Iowa Code 226.1 says that the state shall maintain mental health institutes and shall operate them as regional treatment centers in Clarinda, Mount Pleasant, Independence, and Cherokee. So he does not have the statutory authority to close those facilities. I think if he persists with the proposal to close them without legislative approval, I think it creates what I've said on the floor of the Senate. It would be a constitutional crisis because the legislature is not chopped liver. 1972, Richard Turner, the Republican Attorney General, issued a Attorney General's opinion that only the legislature had the ability to close those facilities. And so I don't want people to think that that's a done deal, because it's not, and we need people to speak up and tell legislators and the governor, don't close those facilities. We need more psychiatric beds, not fewer.
Representative Reiser?
Thank you. The system is currently in transition, and I've got some concerns. I want to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. We are operating in accordance with the Olmstead decision under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which means we have to provide services in the community if that's the best thing for those patients. And one of the problems we have here in Iowa is we don't have all of the services in the community that we need in order to do that transition. So I'm very interested in hearing from DHS a more detailed plan as to how we're going to go through this transition. As Senator Mathis said, though, we have been voting on a number of bills that will address various aspects of this. We're increasing psychiatric residencies. We're expanding eligibility for psychiatric grants, which would help Tanager Place. That's a good thing. If you didn't know it, we're 47th in the country for psychiatrists per capita, so that's an issue we've definitely got to address. We voted on a bill to allow people in border communities to receive services across the border if it were more convenient to do it there than to drive 3 hours. And then we passed a transportation bill which would allow regions to contract to transport mental health patients as opposed to having the sheriffs always being the ones to do that. So we're making progress, but there's still more to be done.
Representative State.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Representative Reiser in reference to the need to have the services and the capacity available in the community, that the closing of these institutions was too soon. The capacity is not there right now, and they did not put forth a plan to handle these patients who are going to be out, and it's also going to put more pressure on the mental health system that already has too few beds.
Representative Running Markler.
Thank you. It is true what some of the representatives are saying and senators are saying before us. We, unfortunately, what the legislature is doing right now is putting together piecemeal legislation trying to tackle some of the issues that closing these institutions would handle, but that's going to be inadequate. And I believe that the governor made a rash decision. He's already sort of slowed people going there and then hand out pink slips to people who worked at these institutions. And then sort of moving forward, my number one concern is safety for us, not only these patients who don't have the beds or don't have the care that they receive, but then for the rest of the community as well. We need to do better than this in Iowa, and I do believe that the governor made a mistake. And I hope that somehow we can fix this legislatively, but it looks like he sort of went ahead without us, and that's unfortunate, and we'll have to see how it plays out in the next couple of weeks.
All right. Do you want to speak to it? Representative Bennett?
Yes, quickly, I just want to thank my colleagues for everything that they've said because I think it's very instructive. We do have some good things that we've seen going on in the legislature, but to add a little bit to what Representative Running Marquardt said, I'm just concerned that these things really won't be cohesive. They won't meet the needs that we have. Some bright spots that I've seen, have been that in a bipartisan way, we have been able to pass some legislation to help veterans get better access to mental health services. I applaud Representative Reiser for working on that and other members of my party. And we've also seen a bill for mental health advocates, which I absolutely applaud, but for someone who needs mental health services and has an advocate, if the services aren't there for somebody to connect you with, that's going to be a big problem. So, not sure what we're going to do, but I know that we're working hard on it.
And Representative Taylor?
Thank you. One aspect I think I'd like to share with you is my longtime friend and Republican Representative Dave Heaton gave a most impassioned point of personal privilege the other day when he basically said that the governor promised him that they would work together. He represents Mount Pleasant area. And he said that the governor told him that in December, and it was a surprise to him when the pink slips came out. And that's an indication of how the governor wants to move ahead, maybe without legislative and even the local Republican representatives of the area. Very concerning. And Dave gave a great speech, and it was a message that I think we should all hear, and that was communication, and let's get a plan together before we move forward. Doesn't mean we can't look at other options, but we have a long ways to go, and I think that if we don't work together, the governor will just try to do it on his own, and he shouldn't be able to do that.
Anyone else want to address it? Steve Paulson?
Well, since I think I'm the only one who hasn't said anything yet, I would just simply add this. First of all, the substance of what everybody said, I mean, those are the different pieces we're looking at. We've been able to address at this point in session some of the, for lack of a better word, I think someone mentioned piecemeal before, and that's kind of what we've done. But as far as wrapping it up together and knowing what the final package will look like when we walk away and are done with our budget bills, I mean, we're still a ways away from that decision. But I don't think the General Assembly, I don't think the House has accepted the status quo as being the final decision, and whatever that looks like. I mean, there's still quite a bit of work to do on that. The only other thing I just want to mention very briefly, because I forgot to when I introduced myself, is I do have to walk out early, so just give you a heads up. I got a commitment, so when I stand up and walk out, it's not because I'm upset about anything. Thank you.
You already warned me. Senator Horn.
Well, since he said I'm the only one basically that have spoken on the issue, the thing that bothers me the most, and you heard Senator Hogue say this, that what he felt about it, but we closed down the juvenile home in Tama, Toledo, and the governor kind of used the same procedure. And one is you stop patients from going there, and that's happening at the two. And the other one is you send pink slips and lay off people. So you look at it and you say, we don't have anyone going there, and we're laying off the personnel. And then you say, well, we'll take you to court. Well, Toledo is still in the courts, I guess. And you kind of know after a fact, 2 or 3 years later, what do the courts do? I mean, it's a mess out there. And I'm afraid that the same thing's going to happen here with the two mental institutions in southern Iowa. So I just don't know what's going to happen. And I'm pointing out that they're not accepting patients. They're handing out pink slips. How do we stop this? So thank you.
Thank you. We're going to change topics here because I think we covered mental health, but there's a lot more questions, but you've covered most of the responses, most of the answers with your responses. We did cover a lot on education, but there's been movement on education in the past couple of weeks. So if Iowa K-12 enrollment falls off or decreases, do you think funding should continue to go up? So this is basically a budgeting bill. We have more questions about that.
It's kind of interesting, pretty solid question. I'm not sure exactly how to answer, but I will tell you this. I mean, the K-12 funding is going to go up. I don't see any scenario where it doesn't. That's not in dispute. The question is how much. There's two areas, kind of thematically. There's the categorical funding that's anticipated to go up about 50-some-odd million this year. And then there's supplemental state aid, formerly allowable growth, and what's that going to go up? The two proposals on the table are from the House, 1.25%, which represents slightly under $50 million, to a total of around $100 million for K-12. The Senate has proposed 4. That pushes the number to something over $200 million. The amount of spending, revenue growth to the general fund we have this year started out at the beginning of the session, it was right on $200 million. Last year we spent about $7 billion. Revenue Estimating Conference said we'd have about $7.2 billion. Revenue Estimating Conference met last week. That now looks like we're going to have, even after accounting for the Internal Revenue Code update bill that we did earlier in the year, it's actually going from about 200 to 180-ish million dollars. So right now we've got, at least from a House perspective, we've got over half of those dollars committed to K-12 education. Like I say, I mean, the spending's going to go up. I don't think that's in dispute. The question is how much, and quite frankly, I wish we could get this done.
Senator Horn?
Cindy, I had indicated I wanted to speak, so I'm going to, I think you meant.
So did Senator Horn. He got my attention first.
He did.
Okay, well, let's,
Guess I have to sit back because it looks like the hand's going up.
maybe,
over there.
and I know I'm honored to look like Senator Horn. He is an inspiration to me. Here's the situation. Iowa's funding for education has fallen on a per student basis relative to other states. Our teachers are doing a great job. We're continuing to make progress. Other states are leapfrogging ahead of us as other states have invested more in education. We are now over $1,600 below the national average in per pupil funding. By the way, it didn't used to be the case. When I was a student in the 80s, we were always in the top 10 for education funding. And now we've fallen all the way to 35th in the country. Even if you adjust on a cost of living basis, we're 28th. So we're falling behind. Last night I had the opportunity to see Governor O'Malley speak from Maryland. Maryland made a different decision, has invested heavily in their schools. In the last 5 years in a row, it's been rated as the best schools in the country. Maryland. Where's Iowa ranked? The Annie E. Casey Foundation says we're 13th. Education Week says we're 37th. Neither of those is where we need to be. The foundation of our state, our economy, our future, it's education. We've got to have the best schools possible, not just for my kids, not just for Todd's kids, but for all of our kids, because that's the key to our future. And you know what? If we need the money, let's go get it for our schools. Thank you.
Representative Bennett.
Thank you very much, Senator Hogue. And I wanted to address this because I think that I may be wrong, but the question that is behind the question is, should we increase per pupil spending? And I think that the answer to that is absolutely yes. We're somewhere around 37th in the nation, and when we lag behind, here's what we get. We get outdated technology that does not prepare our kids for the workforce, that does not prepare them in many cases to attend college, does not prepare them for the STEM jobs of the future, and I think that's wrong. I think that I've seen some things with budgeting where we keep being told that we just simply don't have this money. At the same time, I've seen some bills coming out of committee that could have a fiscal impact of between $400 to $500 million. And to me, that's a little bit like saying, Timmy, Susie, gosh, you know, I really care about your education and I had the money for it, but I'm going to give that money away. Sorry. So that's my view on it. We absolutely need to prepare our kids for the future, and that means making these investments right now.
Representative Bernie Markert.
Thank you. I think I might have jumped in front of Representative Spade, so can he be on the list next if there maybe be? I've been in the Cedar Rapids School District a couple times this last couple months, and the College Community School District. I'm there quite often. I have a son that attends school there, and I see our teachers doing more with less. Yes, we are below the national average for people spending. And then what happens is we've been waiting for the REC, the Revenue Estimating Committee, to come in to tell us sort of what is the economic outlook for the state of Iowa for the next couple years. And they came in, I went to the meeting, and they said, cautiously optimistic several times. And so that's sort of when those who know quite a bit about our economy in Iowa, that's Iowan for we're doing okay. So if we can move forward and sort of prioritize education, there's my 30 seconds. If we can move forward by prioritizing education, that's sort of what a lot of people said when I've gone door knocking in my district and other places, that's their number one priority. I think we should do that. And I believe that the 1.25% that has been proposed is very difficult because that doesn't seem like it's prioritizing education. When what that means in the Cedar Rapids School District, that a minimum of 20 teachers are going to be let go. And what does that mean? It means larger class sizes for our kids that are in schools. So what we do in Des Moines impacts the classroom directly, and I hope that moving forward we can do a better job of, prioritizing education. Thank you.
Representative State, and then I know Senator Mathis had her hand up too, and Representative Reiser, so go ahead.
Thank you, Cindy. I want to try to answer that question because I think I asked administrators of our school districts the same question. So first of all of us have faced the inflationary pressures. Everything, it seems, has gone up, except right now gasoline. But there are additional expenses each year that school districts have because of increasing costs for just about everything that they purchase and everything they do, which will be the first thing. So if a district lost 100 students, there are fewer students than they had, you would think, well, what they should save then. That would be less money that the district would need if they have fewer students. But across the district, let's say like Cedar Rapids, 100 students, that isn't going to be 100 students in one school, so that you could have 3 less teachers and so on. These are spread out. So you're not going to be able to reduce staff. You're going to have the same buildings that you've got to heat and take care of, the same maintenance people and so on, even with 100 less students. And that means that they would get $600,000 less in funding from the state. So we see that these school districts, particularly those that have fewer students, the costs that they have are actually there, the costs are increasing, and they're getting less money from the state. That's why the allowed growth is very, very important, to make sure that they have funds in order to meet the needs of the students that they have. And districts across the state have told us that 1.25 is not enough fund to keep up with what they're doing. So it would mean cuts to teachers, and as the representative said, larger class sizes and so on. Thank you.
Senator Mathis?
Thank you, Cindy. I was going to address the same thing. So bills and business. In bills, the bills that come into school districts, Alliant Energy doesn't say, oh, sorry about the supplemental state aid. We're not going to charge you as much as we did last year in your energy bill. Or the office supply company isn't going to say, oh, you know what, the paper costs, I know they've increased, we're not going to charge you that much. So in an overall spending plan for a budget, costs keep increasing. Those are not going to stop. Those are outside forces that we have no control on, but we need to keep up with. So that's the bills part, and I think Representative State addressed that. The other part is business. So every Friday, I go to either a business or an agency or a school in my district and visit and talk with them about, about whatever they want to talk about and ongoing legislation. Just yesterday, I went to a business in Marion, and he said to me, the CEO said to me, you've got to concentrate on our educational quality. We will support you in any way. I need workers. I need employees. I need employees who are well-educated, and we will train them. Just send us a well-educated employee and a student from the state of Iowa. And he said, that's who will stay here. Those are our loyal employees, and that's what we'd like to see happen at the state capitol. So if we can get more businesses supported, good education. I think maybe we'll convince our GOP brethren over the House to do that.
Representative Reiser.
Just a couple of things. You hear the $1,600 below the national average number thrown out a lot of times. What would it take to get to the national average? You never hear anybody talk about that. Well, if you multiply 1,600 times the number of kids in K-12, it would cost $733 million to get to that national average. So is that what we say we're going to do? We don't have the money. We have $180 million in new available funds. And in the Iowa House, we've committed to spending $100 million of that, which is 55% of our available funds for K-12 education. We've also got a $206 million new Medicaid bill and $142 million for a bipartisan property tax bill, which was passed last session. So we've got more expenses than we have money. The 4% that has been passed by the Senate would be $212 million, which would eat up all of that $180 million and force us to have enormous cuts in Medicaid, which means nursing homes, mental health, and lots of other things. We have yet to hear a plan from those who want 4% as to what they're willing to cut in order to pay for it. And I think until we hear something about that, 4% is not a realistic proposal.
I don't want to not speak if I'm the only one. Right after, about midweek, Ways and Means Committee had a bill this week that passed essentially a flat tax, and it was a suite of tax cuts to the tune of $520 million next year. That's not something that we can afford either. Now, that was just in a committee, and maybe it'll just die in the committee, or maybe it'll come to the floor, and we'll have to really look at the balance sheet. But another thing is, I think you ought to look at, I appreciate what Senator Mathis said, because when the numbers of students go down, the bills don't necessarily change. But there's also another dynamic about education that's kind of fun to think of, and that is that the investment and the return on the investment. More money does equal like a good investment or a good return on investment. So we should strive towards that national average, and maybe that's just the number we should strive to. We can't get there in 1 year, so $700 million is too much. But we don't have to cut and cut and cut. Even when I say cut, the speaker is talking about there's more money towards education. It's going to be more money, but is it enough when the actual results of those dollars are, less teachers and higher, class size? No. So the investment really does return dividends, and it's worthy of our spending. So we got to make other choices. And I heard Representative Reiser say, well, show me where else you're going to cut. I'm going to say I'm not going to vote for any more $520 million flat tax that's mostly steeped towards the very, very wealthy, where they could get a Cadillac and average folks would get a bag of groceries. Not worth it.
Is that it? Thank you. The next questions, he already answered the question.
I just want to follow up on Representative Taylor's comments in terms of what happened to Ways and Means this Wednesday. I think that the House just needs to take a breather on all the tax cuts right now. I would like to have my tax cuts as well. But we just came off the last 2 years from the largest tax cut in the state's history. And a lot of that went to, for corporate property tax. And then to be considering when we're talking about all these budget shortfalls and all the difficulties and the shortage of funds, then we got the other hand in the House passing a $521 million tax cut. They don't think that there'll be consequences for that in our priorities. We need to take a breather, focus on our priorities, make sure that our mental health and our schools are funded, and then take a look at what we can do to help individuals. And I would say individuals with tax incentives. Thank you.
Senator Horn, Representative State just took up your time on that. So the next question is going to be directed at budget, and I think the Representative State, because he took two time periods. The next question is about budgeting, exactly what Representative State was just referring to. So we have in total, we have a funding total, and we have mental health, and education and many other issues. How do you see funding all of the priorities? With what vehicle? Representative Reiser.
I'm the Vice Chair of Appropriations, and I have sat down with the Chair of the Appropriations Committee and the lead staffer, and we have looked at what a budget would look like based on having $180 million of new available revenue and based on all of those expenses we already talked about. And in order to pay for all the things that we have to pay for, just about every other department in the Iowa government is either going to have to take a cut or is going to have to stay static or get a very, very small increase. So I think you've heard lots of people talking about how this is a tight budget year. It just became an even tighter budget year when the Revenue Estimating Commission on Thursday said we had $20 million less than we had planned on. And so what we're going to do is we're going to fund our priorities, and other parts of the government are just not going to see the growth that they might hope for.
Senator Hope. You have the right hand.
Thank you, Cindy. First of all, I don't think it's accurate that the Revenue Estimating Conference took away $20 million. What it did was it said in FY15, our current fiscal year, we're $50 million down. But it said the next fiscal year, we're up $30 million. So that sounds like you're down $20 million, but here's the difference. We already have over $1 billion in our bank accounts, right? So what the FY15 number simply does is reduce our ending balance for this year. We have been living under an arbitrary rule of the House Republicans for the last 4 years that you look at only your intake during a fiscal year as to what you can spend during the fiscal year. So actually, using that rule, we're up $30 million, roughly, from where we were because of the Revenue Estimating Conference. Now, Iowa law, because Iowa law has always said we have to have a balanced budget, very fiscal discipline, we can't use that because that number's up. But it didn't affect negatively our budget for FY16 in any way, shape, or form. We've got over $1 billion in our bank accounts. State government neglecting mental health, neglecting education, neglecting public safety because Governor Branstad is hoarding cash. It should be the next episode of Hoarders. All the money that the state of Iowa has decided to pile up in its bank accounts rather than invest in the people of Iowa.
Representative State.
Thank you. I just want to add an additional comment on the Revenue Estimating Conference. Revenue did not go down. The estimates weren't as high as they had been in December, and the growth is at 4 to 5%. We actually had more revenue collected since December, and $98 million of that revenue went towards the tax recoupling that we did this year, the coupling with the federal tax, and that took 98 of that million that had been a growth number. So we're very optimistic, cautiously optimistic about this. So we're not growing at the rate that they thought they had, that we were going to be, which is over 5%, but now it's 4 to 5%, and it's still very strong and healthy growth. Thank you.
Did I see any other hands? Representative Ray Markford.
So when we're talking about the budget, yes, there were, there was a meeting where the Revenue Estimating Committee said, we're cautiously optimistic, exactly what Representative State said, and the sky is not falling for Iowa in our fiscal house. Our fiscal house is in order. We don't spend more than we take in. We do have $1 billion. The coffers are full. And so then it comes a time where we need to prioritize what's important to us. And, there also is the opportunity for us to look at the $400 million in tax cuts or tax credits that come right out the budget right away. Many of those go to many large businesses. Maybe just giving them a look. I think that's very reasonable. And then we have another $200 million in commercial property tax payback that we're sending to back to the local communities. That was part of the commercial property tax legislation that passed here. So that's $600 million. we could possibly look at, but that's still already factored in when we're looking at all these numbers that say that in the state of Iowa, we are fiscally sound, we do have the ability to move forward, and we do need to prioritize things like education and providing basic needs for those who have mental illness in the state of Iowa.
Speaker Paulson.
Thank you. Just a couple things. First of all, shocking as it may seem, I think everybody's analysis of what the Revenue Estimating Conference did is actually accurate, but it's also probably remarkably confusing. Here's the bottom line, though, and I mean, I can tell you from a House Republican standpoint, from my standpoint, it is not arbitrary. We will balance ongoing revenue with ongoing expenses. We're not going back to the days of spending one-time dollars on ongoing revenue. Some may not like that, get it. We're not going to do that. We're not setting things up for cross-the-board cuts again. We're not getting into a situation where we're going to start burning down our cash reserve fund again so that local governments have to float the state because we can't pay our bills on time. We're not doing those things. So, bottom line, last year we spent roughly $7 billion. In December, the Revenue Estimating Conference said we would have $7.2 billion. The last week's estimate now says we're going to have $7.18 billion. That's $20 million less than we thought we were going to have. Back to the question, how are we going to do that? I can tell you, we're not going to fund the collective bargaining contracts. The regions aren't going to get everything they asked for. Community colleges probably aren't going to get everything they asked for. We're going to have to make some serious decisions in the Health and Human Services budget, the Justice budget, which is, these are primary functions of state government. We're going to have to go through all those, and I will tell you, if you're not one of those, you're going to have a tougher time with this budget. It's going to be a difficult year.
Senator Mathis?
To paraphrase my friend Senator Brian Shanejohn, who is the chair of Education Appropriation, when someone asked him about using the rainy day fund for funding education, he said, "It's a storm out there. It's a storm out there. Why not use it?" Second thing, it's interesting how other states take a look at our budgeting practices and the financial health of our state. So many providers are sitting out here, and you know about Medicaid reimbursement, correct? So your Medicaid reimbursement dollars are less because the federal government is looking at us and saying, you're a pretty healthy state. You are providing services to people, and look at your financial coffers. It's called FMAP. And so that's the federal match with the state match. And the federal government is looking at us as a pretty healthy state. That's all I have to say.
Did I see Representative Taylor?
Yes, thank you. I'm a strong advocate for let's have ongoing expenditures meet ongoing revenues, and let's not spend any more than we take in. Now, so the law says we can't spend any more than 99% of what we take in, and that's great. We shouldn't go above that. But we don't necessarily have to craft a budget that is 90, 91, 92, or 93, or 94%, because the difference between 94% budget and 99% budget could be somewhere around $350 million. And those are all based on estimates, and that still keeps us where we match ongoing expenditures with ongoing revenues. So the other thing about what happened on Thursday at the REC meeting was that's the beginning of the budget process. And so we'll see budgets being crafted, and let's not spend any more than we take in, but let's not necessarily spend the least amount, because we have Economic Emergency Fund, Cash Reserve Fund, Ending Balance, Taxpayers Trust Fund, there's another one in there, but it all adds up to $1.1 billion, and I'm not saying we should spend all that, but it depends on how you want to look at those numbers to craft a budget and still stay under that 99%.
Moving on to another topic. This has to do with House File 493. It says this is property rights and protection rights. Where do you stand on House File 493? It's called the right to assistance. We have questions on both sides of this, people who are for it and people who are against it. So if you'd like to explain what that is and what the ramifications might be if it passes or if it fails. We have lots of questions on both sides. Representative State.
Yes, I think I'll address this because I've been working with individuals to try to reach some kind of compromise, get language that fit both sides of this issue to make sure that everyone has a right to assistance and that there's no reason for them to not call for help emergencies in Cedar Rapids. And then there is the other side of this. We have the Safe CR program, which this is addressing. It would actually probably exempt it. So the ordinance would not be effective with this bill on these, what is called the House Bill 493, right to assistance. But for the past 2 years, I believe, the landlords and everyone else have been involved in this process to make this ordinance work. And they've had lots of opportunity to do that. And I know the city has made all kinds of concessions and changes to that ordinance over and over again to make sure that people are safe. That is the issue, is making people safe in our communities. I know that the city, that's what their effort is for. That's also, I think, what the landlords want. But we need to find language that's acceptable to both groups and move forward with it. Thank you.
Representative Bennett.
Thank you. So I would echo what Representative State said. I've received information, looked over information. I also attended a meeting with people from the city along with Representative State earlier this week. And, some of the concern with other ordinances in other places is that, there may be some type of incentive for landlords to evict victims of domestic violence because of police calls and things like that. So if that were the case, for example, with the Safe CR program, I would have a real problem with that. We see with our Safe CR program, though, that it's my understanding that because a police call resulting from a person being a victim of a crime, whether it's domestic violence or a robbery or something like that, does not create a strike on the property. It does not create a financial burden on the property owner. Therefore, it also does not create any type of financial incentive for a victim to be evicted from their home. So I have 30 seconds here. I do represent some of the areas in Cedar Rapids where a lot of crimes do happen with a lot of rental properties. And I have heard from the neighborhood associations, and I have seen that the Safe CR ordinance has been something that has made our community safer. So open to information, but I certainly will not be a fan of doing anything that would harm our ordinance.
Thank you. Anyone else? Senator Mathis?
I think, too, the issue is about our core neighborhoods, right? Our core neighborhoods in Cedar Rapids, and in Ames, and in the Quad Cities, and in Iowa City. We've seen a lot of thriving core neighborhoods that were single-family home ownership turned into more rental property, taking a home, and you divide it into 4 apartments. And you increase parking on the streets, and you increase garbage collection, and you increase a lot of things that were not intended for core neighborhoods, to keep the core of a city moving and thriving, and people have ownership in their property, and they take pride in their property. The ordinance that Cedar Rapids has in place is a lot like that of Quad Cities and Ames and Iowa City, same thing. And we want to make sure that we are progressing on the track of keeping our city thriving, keeping it safe, having some pride in our neighborhoods, and making sure that the hard work that's been done between landlords and the city and tenants is kept in place.
Anyone else? Okay, moving again back to a budgeting bill. This is about the aged, so the other end of the spectrum. How do you plan to address older adult issues such as criminalization of elders, the funding of home and community-based services, or improvement in nursing homes? These are these being addressed in the House or in the Senate, is the question. Who would like to?
Can you read that again, please?
The issues on the aged. Criminalization of elder abuse. Let's take that first. Is there any bill on criminalization of elder abuse that you would like the people to be aware of? Quality improvement within nursing homes. Or more funding of homes and community-based services. This is all aged issues, issues on the aging. Yes, Senator Mathis?
Yes, we took up we took up probably 8 bills this session in regard to a couple of those issues, and they were sponsored by OIL, by the older Iowa legislature. And do I have the right OIL? I know it's OIL. And some of them were buoyant, and they made it through subcommittee and made it through full committee. But some of them were not, based on too broad a look at some of the subject matter, and that the calling for a study group or the calling for some type of interim committee was not going to solve the issue. We need to move from having study groups and interim committees to really getting into the heart of the subject and passing policy that's going to make change at this point. I think we've collected all the data, we have all the information, and now what we need to do is really pass the policy. So I'm going to look to many of the experts in this area over the summer, and we need to start crafting policy that's directed towards some of these issues instead of being more global statements or a narrative. We did pass a couple of things out of the Senate. I'm running out of time, so and I'll let somebody else pick up that part of it.
Who wants to go next?
Well,
You may take one of your colleagues' times if you.
Cindy, the last year we passed a significant bill. Here, one of the challenges in this job is we've got hundreds of issues that we're dealing with, and we're trying to remember all this stuff, and you got facts and figures. And I spent yesterday trying to promote watershed management, right? So I apologize, but on elder abuse, we passed significant legislation last year to do that. There were some efforts this year to clarify it. I'm not the chair of the Judiciary Committee this year, but I believe Senator Sodders made the determination they didn't think the amendments to the elder abuse law were sufficiently ripe. Let me put it that way, that they needed a little more work. So I don't know. I don't know if there's pending legislation in the House on that. Maybe one of the representatives can address that. But in the Senate Judiciary Committee did not move forward an elder abuse bill after we'd acted last year on it, because I think we're giving that a little more time to work.
Does anyone else want to address this issue? So for those of you that are interested, please contact your legislators. It looks like we're going to be running out of time, so we may have time for one more question here. The League of Women Voters and I would like to thank our legislators and you, the audience, for participating. Remember, if you didn't get a question answered, there are lots of questions here we were not able to get to, and I tried to paraphrase and put things together so that they could give you an overview. If if you have a question, please contact your legislator. We're going to have more questions here. I have more up here. So once again, thank you for your participation. We will finish up with the last series of questions. So this is one more with mental health, going back to mental health, but it also has to do with funding and with this aged issue. It says there are no more group homes or jobs for most with disabilities. There are more needs than just mental health services. What are the plans for the state to address these issues? These are disabilities, autism, and that population. Representative Reichert.
I'm extremely concerned with the fact that a lot of people with disabilities are being kicked to the curb as places like Options of Lynn County and others are getting out of what has traditionally been called the sheltered work business. And while transitioning to competitive integrated employment is always the preferred result for anybody with a disability, there are people who, either because they choose not to or because it's not appropriate for them to, are unable to get competitive integrated employment in the community. And under the current system, the only option for those people is to go to rehabilitation. And a lot of those people still want to work. And so I've introduced one bill which will encourage that competitive integrated employment. It's going to update the tax deduction that employers and small businesses get when they hire somebody with a disability. And I've also been working in a bipartisan way on another bill that will create a private pay work center system for people with disabilities who still want to work but maybe can't work in the community. So I'd ask for your support on that.
Senator Hogue?
Thank you. Couple things on this. First of all, we've talked a lot about the mental health institutes. Here's the next big issue that we need to address. The problem is it's not as urgent because it's part of the budget. Governor Branstad, in his budget, proposed eliminating equalization. Equalization will remove $30 million from our new regional mental health system. For Lynn County, it would be over $2 million lost. For Polk County, it would be over $6 million. So that's a big deal to suck that money out of the system. The reason given is, well, the counties have ending balances. Well, wouldn't you want to have an ending balance? Wouldn't you want to have an ending balance after the state has cut and cut and cut and cut over the past 20 years in mental health? I think I would if I was a county. So that's a bogus argument. The other big issue is the movement to Medicaid managed care. By the way, unlike the institutes, where it is clearly illegal for Governor Branstad to unilaterally shut down those facilities, he has the statutory authority to go to Medicaid managed care, where he's going to hire private companies to administer managed care HMOs for Medicaid patients. Well, guess what? They have a cap of 15% on the profits and administrative costs for the private entities. That's over $600 million. Currently, we administer the Medicaid program at a cost of $22 million through the Iowa Medicaid Enterprise. So we're going to invite in these private companies. You know how they're going to get their profits? By denying services.
Senator Mathis?
I do have to speak to that 15% admin cost. That is a one-time cost in the RFP. That is a startup cost when we move from Medicaid to managed care. So I anticipate as a legislator that that 15% is not going to be 15% the next year, the year after. That will be reduced down to more of an administrative fee of 10% or less after that. But that's the only thing that I'm in argument with Senator Hogue about. You need to keep your eyes wide open about managed care. We have, the RFP has been explained throughout several of the communities. DHS has been around and done community hearings. Several people have attended. They're taking comments. They have more than 600 comments and questions and suggestions right now on their RFP process. That window will close. Managed care providers will be scored and selected. There are about 15 of them that have vied for billions of dollars of funding, as Senator Hogue has talked about. It has to be set up by this fall, and it will be ready to go by January 1st of next year. We have a managed care oversight bill. It's very comprehensive that we've passed in the Senate. We hope the House is going to take it up and won't make very many changes, but it oversees the work that the managed care organizations will do. As a legislative body, we're going to put oversight into that. It's necessary and needed because these are your dollars, and we want to make sure that the vulnerable population in the state of Iowa is well cared for.
Thank you, Senator Mathis. We have like 1.5 minutes left. I want to once again thank you for being here. Remind you that the next forum will be on April 18th. And the league wants to remind you to vote. It's your way to participate in this process. Your vote and your neighbor's votes and everyone else that you know that's a registered voter, get them to the polls. Again, we had several questions this morning that we did not get to address. Thank you very much, and thank you for participating.
We did get an answer.